Here's what the finished app looks like on an emulator. The main activity uses a recycler view and adapter to display a list of tasks that have some description and a priority number, 1 through 3. Initially, this activity won't display anything because the database will be empty. But for this example, I've added a couple of tasks just so you can see what they look like. Adding task data will be done through a separate activity, which is launched by this plus button. You may have seen buttons like this before. They're called floating action buttons since they kind of float above a layout and perform some action when they're clicked. When you click this one, it opens another activity that lets a user input a task with some selected priority. There's also a color associated with each priority, red for the highest, then orange and yellow. So let's add a new task. I'll type finish learning Android, and I'll give it a medium priority since it's below, say, breathing. And then I'll click this add button. This returns to the main screen, and you can see that the task has been added to the list and sorted by priority. So this lands right between breathing, which is priority 1, and grocery shopping, which is the lowest priority, 3. Now, you won't start with all this functionality. Instead, you'll be given starter code that includes only the basic UI and an empty task database and content provider structure. And throughout this lesson, we'll be building off that starter code so that we can insert and display tasks like in this finished app. So let's do a quick walkthrough of the starter code. The to-do list data package has 3 classes. First, there's the shell of the task content provider class, which we'll be completing throughout the lesson. Then also task contract and task DB helper classes, and you've seen the likes of these before in the SQLite lesson. The task DB helper creates the database that stores our task data, which you can see here in onCreate. And the task contract class keeps track of any constants that help us access the underlying data. As you can see, right now it contains the name of our table and its columns. Outside of this data folder, our starter code also includes UI code for add task activity, an adapter, and our main activity. The main activity is going to set up our main layout code. And all the layout code can be found in our resources layout folder. But let's poke around our main activity. Inside the onCreate function, we set up the recycler view and adapter, which are responsible for displaying the task data. Lower down, you see that there's a click listener attached to our floating action button, our fab button for short. The fab has an attached on-click listener so that when it's clicked, it can launch an add task activity. And add task activity is where you'll have to write code to accept user input and create new task data. At the bottom of our main activity code, you'll find the loader callbacks, and you'll be responsible for implementing these to retrieve data on a background thread. And if any of this code looks unfamiliar, please take a look back at lessons 3 and 4, which go over recycler views and async task loaders. So a lot of the UI code is provided in the starter code, but if you run it, it won't do much. Let's try it out. Here's the starting state of our app. Nothing will be displayed, and you can't add tasks yet. To display tasks and make the add buttons work with our SQLite database, we'll be building a content provider and hooking it up to this UI. For now, I encourage you to look around this incomplete code, look at the XML layouts, and read any of the comments if you want more detail about what a class or function is for. Next, let's see the structure of our task data so that we can start building a provider to access it.